The Recovery Star was developed by an organisation called the Mental Health Providers Forum, and they developed this some time ago in conjunction with a group of service users and clinicians, and they saw the importance of developing a tool which could actually be utilised by service users to rate their own kind of view of where they felt their recovery journey was going. So it's called what's termed a PROM. So this is a patient-reported outcome measure. So our clients themselves can rate where they feel they're doing on the recovery journey. This isn't done by clinicians. This isn't me saying, well, I think you're doing really well with this, or I think you're doing really badly on your recovery journey. This is allowing our clients themselves to make a judgment of how they feel they're doing on a range of different dimensions.
Yeah, I think number 6 sounds more like me.
The Recovery Star was about developing a meaningful interaction between worker and client, and it not just being based around the paperwork that the trust needed completing, which is very important, but I guess services should be about predominantly about clients and client-led. Recovery Star does that.
I think over the last few years we've seen a big change in the way that we think about recovery in mental health. I suppose for a long time, in terms of some of the serious mental health problems, we didn't even really think about recovery. We thought that people just would have periods when they didn't have symptoms, and then at some point those symptoms may re-emerge. But it was always seen as being, you had a relapse from your difficulties, and that relapse was always seen as being in terms of an admission to hospital and difficult times. Nowadays, we kind of think about recovery in a much broader sense. We don't just think about it in terms of absence of symptoms. We think about it in terms of how someone's getting on with their life.
Recovery really is about reclaiming a full sense of self, reclaiming a whole person, so that we're not just looking at treating someone, we're not just looking at getting rid of someone's symptoms, we're looking at helping them find themselves, or helping them develop a new sense of self or a framework around their whole life. Do you want to tell me a little bit about what recovery means to you?
There's a huge amount of emphasis placed on hope and optimism, that actually if someone can have some belief in themselves as an individual, if someone can have hope that there is a possibility of getting through some of the difficulties they've got, that plays a huge part in someone's recovery. And that's been a massive shift in terms of the way that we deliver services now. At times someone may not have much hope. They may feel, due to the difficulties that they've got, that there isn't much in the way of hope for them. And I guess it's up to services to hold hope for people at times in order that they can then move through the difficulties that they have.
It starts to build their life up again. It starts to focus on their strengths, and it starts to allow people to move into different areas. If you go to a service and all they talk about is depression, then there's a good chance that you're going to walk away and feel depressed. If somebody starts talking about who do you trust, and have you got any hopes for the future, and where do you want to go with that, and you start to say, yeah, I'd like to start some education, I'd like to start that, then actually you're going to walk out of a session different, I believe.
The Recovery Star actually has a sense of purpose behind it, so that when they're charting their recovery journey, the service user knows what that means to them as a person. The Recovery Star means collaboration. So it's not just someone sat down and asking questions and ticking off boxes. It's a discussion, it's a tool. It gives better autonomy, it gives a kind of sense of control over the situation. So with the Recovery Star, you don't have someone telling you who you are, you don't have someone telling you where you are. It's the service user who's telling us, this is where I feel I am, this is where I feel I want to be, and this is how I feel I will get there.
The sessions with the therapist I always find pretty... It's good because you can get a lot off your chest, you know what I mean, and decide whereabouts you are on the Recovery Star, and then notice that if you've moved forward, it gives you a bit of a boost, you know what I mean, and then you realise that you're heading towards your goal.
It's more like a conversation over a cup of tea, rather than a formal session with your therapist. And sometimes it can get a bit a bit high-pitched when you're sort of trying to make your point. Well, actually, I think I'm doing much better. And, and then sort of you realise perhaps another area you've completely not even bothered And it's really good, it's good fun because they see things that I don't see as a service user. And then I might point out that, yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but to my mind, the way that I think of social skills improving might be something completely different.
In a typical session for me, what I normally do is I introduce the Recovery Star, I explain what it's about, and how they might be able to benefit from it. We're looking at 10 different subject areas, okay. I explain that we're going to touch on each area very briefly, but in enough, information for us to be able to gauge whereabouts they are on each ladder. And then I write down everything that they tell me, so that when we've finished at the end, we can look back and identify which specific areas are priority. And then together we can work out an action plan. And then I usually make sure that the actions are put in place within that one session, with a time scale, only small steps that are achievable and realistic. And I find that at the end of it, the patient, more often than not, really feels, that they've had a very, very good key work session.
On average, to go through all of these dimensions and kind of chart all of that, it's probably going to take about an hour to an hour and a half in the first go round. After that, if you do it again, it's going to be quicker because you've got this kind of shared understanding of the tool. You know what you're doing.
Is it any particular kind of new people? So the Recovery Star has 10 different domains. It's important to note that one of them focuses on addictions, another one focuses on symptoms of mental health issues, but the rest of them focus on much more broader aspects such as hope, optimism, work, leisure, these kinds of factors. And it's those that are incredibly important in terms of getting a broad picture of how someone's functioning. And not just in terms of if someone's struggling or not, but also to look for positives as well.
Because it's a new situation, you don't know what the outcome will be. So the nature of recovery in itself is that it's complex. Like, you're not going to have someone who just moves from A to B and that's it. It's not just one linear journey. People are complex. Every individual has a story to tell, and that story is going to go forward and backwards. We're going to have setbacks along the way. Now, it's really about how we interpret that. So for someone who's embarking on that recovery journey, to have a setback might feel like the end of the world. That could seem like a real problem to them, and it might feel like, I can't do this. But you know what? It's all about how you interpret this, and it's all about how we learn and how we learn together. So when we embark on this journey, if we've had that setback, that's okay, because we've already learned so much, and it shows that we can move forward. So it's more about that. It's not about, I only got so far and then I had a setback. It's actually, I got so far, and that's the real thing to take away from that. And that can really boost someone's self-esteem and someone's hope when you're discussing this. And I think as a professional, that's something that we can really help with. So how we interpret these setbacks or how we learn from those.
We've plugged this into our electronic kind of patient record system. So at a team level, the team can see whether or not they're impacting on people's recovery journey. And at an organisational level, what we can see is whether we're impacting on people's recovery journey that come into our organisation. We have a kind of mission statement which is about improving lives and optimistic future. If we adopt this, it won't just be a mission statement that we kind of hold dear to our hearts and think that's what we want to aspire to. We'll be able to actually demonstrate it as well.